Yo guys, Superior David here. Mini set's been out for, about a week now, which means it's time for me to go over what I think are the best decks so far that you can use to hit Legend. Unfortunately, I feel like the Maw and Disorder has probably been one of the least impactful mini sets in all of Hearthstone history. I might do a video on this later in the week if there's any interest, let me know about that down in the comments. But anyways, what you need to know for this video is that new cards bad, old cards good. And I think this becomes just so incredibly apparent when you look at what the best deck in the game is. And to the surprise of hopefully no one, that deck would be Beast Hunter. Beast Hunter is just a monster of a deck right now in the meta, and there are just so many different builds going around at the moment, and I'd say the differences are relatively minor. So if you're playing a slightly different list, don't even worry about it, because these decks are basically all the same at their core, outside of just 4 to 5 different cards. So yeah, we're running the new Defense Attorney of Thanos, and as well as the Sylvanas the Accused, and I think both these cards are quite nice in this deck. But if you don't want to shell out the dust to craft these cards, that's totally cool. You can get by without them. Now, I think there are 2 reasons why Beast Hunter is just performing so well at the moment. With the first being that this is just a mid-range good stuff deck. You basically just have a powerful card to play just every single turn. You can go Trogon 1 into Doggy Biscuit into Wild Spirits, and just snowball games super aggressively, especially with that Hunter hero power. And then you could just win games before they even get started. Simultaneously, we also have some really good mid-game cards here, Pet Collector with the Ajaran Saber, as well as just the Beaststalker Tavish. But then moving on up the curve here, we've got Sire Denathrius and Wing Commander Eekman, which are just so good at swinging the late game back in our favor. And I think this ability to just simultaneously go really aggressive or manage to shift over to a long game if needed is what makes this deck just so formidable. And then the second reason why Beast Hunter is doing so well at the moment is, it's simply because people are experimenting with new cards that have just turned out to be pretty bad. So, Hunter gets a lot of just free wins from people just, playing just bad decks at the moment. And, Beast Hunter is a deck that was it was good before the mini sets. The cards being added here, they probably make the deck a bit better, but it's not they're really changing the core function of how this deck is really played out. So the deck is good before, it's good now. Nothing new is really rising up to really combat the Beast Hunters efficiently, and I think people are starting to realize that. So while Beast Hunter, it's definitely the best deck in the game, without a doubt, and I do see it getting nerfed in the future. There are some decks from the previous meta that are starting to come back in the game to just challenge this Hunter supremacy that's just been taken over ladder, let's be real here. And I would say that the big deck that's rising up would be the XL Spooky Skeleton Mage. Not only is this very just on flavor because Halloween, but it turns out this deck actually totally slaps Beast Hunter. And I'd say the early game sort of skeleton cards like the Cold Case and the Nightcloak Sanctum, and even the non-skeleton cards like the Frostweave Dungeoneer, these cards are just really good at just clogging up that early game board and just slowing down the Hunter's early game aggression. But then moving on down the curve, you also have a lot of good stall potential with the Blizzard, and then you can recur that with the Grey Sage Parrot or the Magister Dawngrasp, which I'd say is still pretty good. You just don't want to be keeping this card in the mulligan anymore. And then moving back up here, we've got the Solid Alibi, which is just fantastic damage mitigation. I've scammed so many games against Hunters with these Solid Alibis, and it's absolutely hysterical when you can recur multiple copies with the Commander Sivara, so definitely keep that in mind. But anyways, all this stalling really helps us get to our later game, the Sire D, the Rune of the Archmage, and then of course the Mordresh. And I think these cards are just really good at snapping victory back from the jaws of defeat. Again, I've won many games against Hunters just from stalling out, playing a Mordresh. They have no board, they have no cards in hand, they concede, and it's a really wonderful time. Now, some of you might not be encountering much Skeleton Mage on ladder at the moment. I feel it's starting to become just the deck to play at High Legend, and I definitely see it trickling down over the next week. So if you want to get a head start on the upcoming meta, definitely start practicing this deck. But if you want to take things a step further and start playing a deck that does okay against Hunter but also beats Mage, this next deck will definitely be the one for you. And that deck would be the Curse Imp Warlock. Now, I think in the early days of the mini set, we saw a lot of people going back to the pure Imp versions with Sire D as the top end, and it does perform pretty well on ladder. But I think if Mage is coming back, you're definitely going to want to be playing the Curse Imp versions of the the Imp Warlock. The curse builds sort of allow you to just have a much better game against Mage, because these curses here allow you to sort of bypass the damage mitigation abilities of Solid Alibi. You get some drag from below triggers with Tamsin or like, maybe you just recurse some curses with Darkbane, or of course the good old Bran with whatever, Battlecry curse card you got in hand. You get a couple of those curses in hand after the Mage has played Solid Alibi. They're going to take a lot of damage even though they played Solid Alibi. So the curses actually represent like just a ton of inevitability, and I feel like I always underestimate just how much damage this deck could actually like output with the curses, because I'm always so focused on this like early game aggression plan with like the imps, and I think granted, like most games you would just like to curve out aggressively with like Flame Imp plus or Librarian, get that Vile Library down on 2, and then follow up with Fiendish Circle. You could just like win a lot of games there, but like if you get pushed off the board, that's when the curses really start to shine. And I think against Mage, these curses are just like chef's kiss. But honestly, if you're encountering like just tons and tons of Hunter, you might be better off just going with like the pure Imp versions of the Imp Warlock deck. So I will share a link to one of those down in the comments below, alongside this Curse Imp build, which I think is just, it's my preferred deck if I got to play some Imp Warlock on ladder. But if you just really want to stick it to those Hunters, I'd say that Miracle Blast Priest is probably your best bet. I feel like this archetype has always just sort of coasted by because you could just have these incredible pop-off turns and just create these like unwinnable situations for your opponent. So I think it is one of the best decks in the game, albeit just one that's very hard to pilot. Basically, the general strategy to this deck is that like every game you want to spend those early turns just like finding your minions, like using like Thrive in the Shadows to like get Switcheroo, maybe use like Illuminate to find like a minion on the bottom of your deck. You really just want to get like the Radiant Elementals and the Handmaidens. So that way, by like turns like 5 or 6, you're able to pop off. But like ideally by playing the Radiant Elemental, you play just a bunch of buffs on him and just don't pay mana for any of them, because again, it's Radiant Elemental. Maybe you draw some cards with the Handmaiden to sort of gas up and just keep playing buff spells. And then I think like in an ideal world, you'll play like Priestess Valish to refresh your mana. And then you top it all off with a Boon of the Ascended to essentially like launder those stats that you put onto the Radiant Elemental into like a giant taunt minion. The taunt part can be silenced off, but the stats cannot be silenced away. At this point, your opponent will typically get like really salty, emote at you, and then just concede because they're just like, man, I had this game until you had this massive pop-off turn. If you want to learn more about this deck, I'd say check out the video I put up on it like a couple weeks ago. I think the main strategy has just been remained like relatively unchanged. And now the final deck on this list is going to be this Dude Pally deck that I've been absolutely like destroying with lately. It's personally my best performing deck since the mini set releases, which I found like very surprising. And I think this is essentially like the only new deck that we got with the mini set that shows like any promise at all. And now the idea behind this deck is that you want to just not fall behind, get in like a bunch of Paladin cards, like every turn, just always play Paladin cards. So that way you can go for like a Stonehearth Vindicator to tutor up the Order in the Court, which in turn can tutor up a Light Ray. And if you can do this like fast enough, you can generate like a lot of tempo by getting Light Ray on the board, while you also just like develop like, like normal minions for like relative to where you are at like curve wise. I think the Dude package is pretty good, with the Dumbballer Bridge, especially if you can go like bridge into Stand Against Darkness. That could just run away with games. And then like the new Jury Duty can also be some nice burst damage as well. But I think what really carries this deck though is just being able to just turbo cheat out Light Rays just due to the Order in the Court. If you couldn't tell, I'm very hyped on the Order in the Court. This card actually really changes how you build Paladin decks, and I think it's really cool. And in this deck in particular, again, it allows you to just get those Light Rays, get that Countess even like just more consistently. But then like if that fails, you can fall back on this powerful Dude stuff. I've got high hopes for this deck. A lot of people don't realize this, but this Dude Pally list goes even with Hunter, and it goes even with the best deck in the game. So I think there's something to be said to the Dude Pally, but I digress. So there you have it. These are what I think are the best decks in the game at the moment. And just to recap, we got Beast Hunter, just the monster meta deck at the moment, just destroying everything else, really just dictating things at the moment. And because of that, we got Skeleton Mage coming back. That really serves as a counter to Beast Hunter, and we'll hopefully keep it in check. But Beast Hunter will probably get nerfed anyways. And then moving on down, we got the Imp Warlock, the Curse version, which does particularly well against Mage, does decent enough against Hunter where I think it's worth running this version, but you can run the pure Imp version as well and do well on ladder. And then coming on down, we got Miracle Priest, which does well against like Beast Hunter. The only deck that does overwhelmingly well against Beast Hunter, does all right against Mage, can struggle a little bit, but it does well against Imp Warlock. So I think really good deck for ladder. Then bringing it on home here, we got the Dude Pally, which it goes even with Beast Hunter, believe it or not, does well against a lot of the random decks you'll be encountering on ladder that people like to play. And I think it's just an all-around just fun deck that I think just performs a lot better than people give it credit for. Let me know what you think about these decks down in the comments. I'm sure I'll hear no end to this Dude Pally list, but I firmly stand by it, and I will die on this freaking hill that I think the deck actually slaps. But anyways, if you made it this far in the video, you probably like what I'm doing, so make sure to, like and subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the superior things I'm putting out here. And, in the meantime, stay superior, and I'll catch y'all next one. Later.
Get that pool on.